Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about price escalation and competition. Obviously, it's kind of the season right now. Everything's ramping up again with tons of showings and lots of multiple offers. So hence why we wanted to bring this up in one of our mastermind meetings. And I think we're going to have Kong here go over the price escalation addendum in some of the guideline sheets from PAR.
The only thing I'd like to say before Kong does it is that if you receive multiple offers on your listings and you're even slightly unsure of the situation, please call Kong or Brooks or myself to go over it so that you know you're doing it right and don't make a mistake, because we are still running across situations where agents aren't completely understanding the multiple offer and how you work this escalation. So Kong, take it away, and let's hopefully we can better understand it after your presentation.
Okay. I have the price escalation clause up, and there's been a lot of questions as to what to compare, how to compare, and what do we do in general when you have a price escalation clause and multiple price escalation clauses. And the guideline that Brooks sent out is a really great resource to use. There's actually a guideline pretty much for every form out there. It's under PAR, their website. You can download it, read it, and have a better understanding of the form. I believe this form was like 7 pages long for a 1-page addendum. So it just tells you how complicated this form can be if it takes 7 pages to explain 1 page. Okay. The appraisal contingency, which we're going to go over on Thursday, is the same way. I believe that one's like 5 or 6 pages. So if you don't have an understanding of it, we're here for you to help you. Okay. But I have the price escalation clause up here. And if you notice, the first thing it asks for is the property address, seller, and buyer name. Fill that out properly. Okay. So many times we see the wrong seller name on it, especially if it's an estate or if you're missing an initial, whatnot. Just make sure it's filled out properly. Okay. Because especially when you present it to a list agent that's very detail oriented, they'll look at that. Okay. Number 1, this addendum is presented to seller as part of buyer's offer to purchase seller's property. Should seller accept buyer's offer, buyer and seller will have entered into a binding agreement under the terms
in progress
and or other addenda, with the exception of any terms addressed in this addendum. Okay. So paragraph 1, according to the guideline here, it's called the binding agreement. Okay. So when a buyer submits this to the seller, they're at the mercy of the seller to pick a price so long as it follows the escalation clause. Okay. Because if you notice, the buyer signs off on it, and then at the bottom we fill out a price, and then the seller signs it. So there's nothing for the buyer to reinitial or anything like that. Okay. So once it's submitted, the buyer has agreed to purchase up to that price. Okay. Number 2, paragraph 2, it's called setting the price. Okay. If prior to seller's acceptance of buyer's offer to purchase, seller receives from another prospective purchaser a bona fide offer to purchase the property, competing offer, with terms acceptable to seller and a net purchase price, the purchase price less any identified seller assistance and seller financial concessions, equal to or higher than the net purchase price offered by buyer. Buyer agrees that the purchase price of buyer's offer is increased so that the net purchase price is blank dollars higher then the net purchase price in the competing offer up to a maximum purchase price of blank. Okay. So there's two things to consider here. There's the purchase price and the net purchase price. Okay. This escalation clause is really comparing net purchase price. It's easy when you're comparing escalation clauses and everybody is writing an offer without seller help. Where it gets complicated is when they throw in seller help, okay? Because let's say if they pay for $200,000 with 10K in help, then their net purchase price is really only 190, not 200, okay? So consider that. And the other confusion that I've run into is what is seller concession, okay? Well, let's break down the word concession. It means to concede or give up. Okay? So the seller is giving up something financially to the buyer. Okay. So if a buyer is willing to pay transfer tax, is that a seller concession? Anybody?
No.
Right. Because the seller didn't concede in not paying taxes. That's a benefit to the seller, right? That's actually a net gain to them. Now, it could come into play in the net proceeds, okay, but it does not come to play in the net purchase price, okay? If one or more competing offers include similar price escalation terms, this automatic increase will be applied to the maximum escalated sales price of the highest competing escalation term, not to exceed the maximum purchase price stated above. So that statement is in bold, and anytime a statement is in bold in any of these addendums and contracts, it means it's pretty important. And what that statement right there allows you to do is compare escalation clauses, okay? You are absolutely allowed to just compare escalation clause to escalation clause. And what that statement is saying is, you know, you're allowed to go up to the maximum.
This meeting is being recorded.
You're allowed to go to the maximum price escalated of one of the addendums. Okay. So you have, if you have three of them that are willing to go up to 200K and one is willing to go to 210, then the other three, they're at their max already. You're allowed to go to the max. Okay. Now, another question I've gotten is, well, what about terms in the contract? Okay. For example, let's say you have an all cash offer and they wrote $200,000 and they're willing to escalate up to 210. But then you have a USDA deal, right? A little harder loan to get. And they're willing to go up to 215. Well, the cash one is definitely better even at 200 than the USDA one at 215. You know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But that's not up to the buyer to determine. Okay. This addendum allows the seller to just pick to escalate based on the net purchase price and nothing else. Terms doesn't matter. Okay. Terms can come into play later on, but the price is set by this addendum. Okay. Any questions so far? Because I seem to get a lot of questions about, well, if this offer is better as is, you know, do we have to escalate it? Okay. Let's go to paragraph number 3. And paragraph 3 are the amendments. If the purchase price is increased based on the terms of paragraph 2 above, the terms of the mortgage contingency paragraph in the agreement of sale are changed as follows. Check all that apply. So Paragraph 3 here is talking about changes, amendments to the mortgage contingency box, okay, that we have set forth in the agreement of sale. So checkbox number 1, the mortgage contingency is waived. This is not contingent on mortgage financing, although buyer may still obtain mortgage financing, okay? It's very similar to the agreement of sale where it's waived or elect, right? You waive it, it has the same phrase pretty much. So I had a question a couple weeks ago that if you elect the mortgage contingency on the agreement of sale, can you waive it on this addendum? Does anybody know the answer?
I would say yes, you can. And that would be that if the escalation clause wasn't used, then the agreement of sale stands as the way it was written.
You are absolutely correct, Tim. And it actually works vice versa too. You can waive it on the agreement of sale, and because now you're going up in money, you can now elect it. Okay. You can elect a mortgage contingency. Maybe you don't want to waive it now. Okay. So yes, you can do that. Absolutely. You can have it elected on the contract and waive it on the addendum. Okay. The next checkbox, the loan amount stated in the mortgage contingency is increased by the amount necessary to keep the loan to value ratio, a percentage derived by dividing the total value of loans for the property by the purchase price, the same as that set forth in the mortgage contingency paragraph of the agreement of sale, with the remainder paid in cash at settlement. Okay. And what that is stating is, if you elected the mortgage contingency and you put in the agreement of sale that your buyer is getting a 80% loan to value, putting 20% down, okay? Let's say you increase the price $10,000 to $210,000, okay? What this is stating, and it's letting the seller know, is if you increase it to $210,000, that's $10,000 increase, you're gonna put down, bring cash to settlement, the $2,000, okay, the 20% of the 10 grand, and the other 8,000, 80% is going to be added to the loan, and you're going to keep the loan to value the same as it was on the agreement of sale. Okay. Does everybody understand that concept? So basically, you're just keeping the ratio the same on the contract. Okay. I think a lot of people get confused about that little that last part of the last sentence there, comma, with the remainder paid in cash at settlement. And they're thinking, well, what cash? What's the amount? Because it doesn't have a real number there. But what it's stating is that's your down payment to keep the loan to value the same. Okay. All right, checkbox number 3, probably the most confusing one, and it's so confusing. When I read this guideline last week, it made no sense because it was wrong. And I called the hotline, and the attorney there read it with me, and he probably read it 5 times. And he said, yes, it's absolutely incorrect in our guideline. So right before the meeting, I did send an example, and let me see if I can pull it up here. Okay. So this guideline could work 2 ways. Okay, checkbox number 3 can work 2 ways. If your loan to value is already set at, let's say, 85%, okay, checkbox number 3 can either lower that number or raise that number automatically. Okay, and here's how it works. So for checkbox number 3, this is page 5 of the guideline, additional cash change to loan to value. Okay, ignore what they wrote and use this example. Okay. First one is buyer submits an offer with a purchase price of $200,000 and elects the mortgage contingency. The buyer's stated loan amount is $170,000, and the maximum LTV is 85%. So they're putting down 15%, or in this case, $30,000. Okay, everybody follow? The buyer's offer also contains an escalation addendum, which ultimately raises the purchase price to $210,000. However, the buyer can only provide $5,000 in cash at closing and wants to add the remaining $5,000 to the loan. So they increase the price 10 grand. They can't put all $10,000 down. Okay, they can't supply the $10,000. But they are willing to put down half of it, okay, towards the down payment, and the other $5,000 added to the loan. So this will result in an LTV, loan to value now, of 83.3% and an increased loan amount of 175. So their loan amount went from 170. Remember, they added the 5 grand to it, so now it's at 175. And their loan to value actually went down, which is good, to 83.3% because they're putting over half of it. Okay, make sense? So now they need what, $35,000 to come to the table, and they're financing 175. So if you add that up, that adds up to 210. Okay, so now we see that the loan to value actually went down in this example. Okay, now the second example, buyer submits an offer with a purchase price of $200,000 and elects the mortgage contingency. The buyer's stated loan amount is $170,000 and the maximum loan to value is 85%. So I just copy and paste from the first one. The buyer's offer also contains an escalation addendum, ultimately raising the purchase price to $210,000. However, the buyer can only provide $1,000 in cash at closing and wants to add the remaining $9,000 to the loan. Okay, so if you think of it, $1,000 out of $10,000 is only 10%. That's not even the 15% that they agreed on the agreement of sale. So this will result in a loan to value of 85.2%. So it went up a little bit past the 85, and an increased loan amount of 179. Okay. Does everybody follow how that third checkbox can work either way? It can ultimately raise or lower the loan to value. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. The fourth checkbox, and I really advise you never ever to use it, because if you're going to use the escalation clause with a max purchase price, your client should already be approved for that max purchase price. But checkbox number 4 here states, within blank days of the execution date of this agreement, buyer will deliver to seller a written pre-approval letter from the lender identified in the mortgage contingency paragraph, or if none is stated, from a reputable lender, for an amount equal to or greater than the increased loan amount. If buyer fails to provide written pre-approval within the stated time period, seller may terminate the agreement in writing. Okay. Probably should never use that, because they should be pre-qualified or pre-approved for that escalated amount. Okay. And if you as a list agent see that, I would make them go back and get that. Okay. Make them get that before you present offers to your seller. Okay, especially if it's a good offer.
I would think in this market, with all these multiple offers, that if you're going to provide an escalation clause up to that 210, that you should provide a pre-approval right up front for the 210 to show them that you're qualified to do so.
Right.
So,
And Tim, remember, you used to teach me, just go out and show them that you can afford more.
yeah, get the pre-approval for as high as you can get it.
Right.
You know,
I think
people always wanted to get it for whatever the loan amount was, so that they don't know that they could afford more. Well, in this particular case, we want to show them that they're the most qualified buyer that there is.
Right. Yeah, you definitely want to show your buyer is more than qualified to buy this house. Okay.
Tim, I've done that a lot on it, but I've had agents being a lot of pushback on that recently. And apparently that's a big discussion at GHAR on whether they're going to continue to allow that.
Allow what?
Pre-approvals for over the price. Cause I always submit my pre-approval for the max my client's allowed to be approved for.
So if you get a pre-approval for $1 million, that you can buy $1 million house, and you decide to buy a $500,000 house, you have to go get it redone.
So I submitted one last weekend that was 700,000 on a sale price of 465. And it was a big discussion, and I said, well, too bad, it's already there. You already have it. It's pre-approved.
Exactly.
But I've had this a couple times now, and some board members at GHAR told me that that's a big discussion at GHAR, whether or not your pre-approval has to match your offer price and not be exceeding, because it's an unfair advantage.
Well, I'll fight them on that tomorrow when I go to the management and issues breakfast.
Well, I would appreciate that.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to match it. You need to show you're qualified. So we'll fight that tomorrow.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
I just, in certain situations, I've had the question come up, and I'm just curious where maybe you're not competing and the buyer was concerned that by showing more than what the offer amount was, that he was tipping his hand, so to speak, that the seller may then be more apt to come back and ask for more. What do you guys think about that?
Let's rephrase that. If you talk to your buyer and describe the situation and scenario, and they're comfortable with it, then do that. If they're not, as in Jim's case, then maybe you don't show everything. But you have to give the client and sit down with them and explain to them the scenario that plays out.
As a seller, I'd be more worried about if this is all they can afford. They're at the top of their edge. What if one of the numbers is wrong?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what if they don't net what they thought they were going to net, and they gave the information verbally to the lender? You know, at least when it's higher, you know that they're more qualified. So you can just go back at them with the opposite, you know, just turn it on them. You know, you always have the right to say no. If they counter and they want you to go up, just because they can afford more doesn't mean they're going to pay more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yep.
I just brought it up because I had somebody ask that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's come up, but
Yeah.
you know, the best way to do it again is it is their choice, but you can only give them the info as an experienced agent
Sure. Yeah.
and what people are looking for. Okay.
You also need to explain the circumstances. You know, the market is such right now that you need to have your best foot forward, not backward. This gives the seller the opportunity to say, I'm protected if, you know, this guy can make the deal work. When you're showing, you know, what they maximum can afford. So that would be my thought on it.
Mm-hmm.
So paragraph 5 is another one that I get a lot of questions on as well. Let's read this and then we'll turn over to the guideline. Seller will provide a copy of the competing offer to buyer no later than the time seller returns a copy of the executed agreement to buyer. Okay, so when do you get a copy of the competing offer? When you send the contract, the executed contract to the buyer at the same time, okay? Not a week later, okay? Not 2 days later, but pretty much at the same time, if not even before. Okay? You don't want the buyer to say, well, you know, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. You want to have all your questions answered before you tell the other 6 offers that you took this one. Okay? Seller may remove the name of the other prospective purchaser, but may not remove any financial terms, including the purchase price or any seller assistant or other seller financial concessions. Okay, so let me just see here. Let's go to the guideline real quick. And we're talking about paragraph 5, competing offers. States here, the escalation addendum only becomes active if there is another bona fide offer from a qualified purchaser. The seller is required to provide a copy of the other agreement of sale for the buyer to verify that it exists. Without another higher valid offer, the original purchase price stays in effect unless the buyer and seller negotiate another price. If fraud is uncovered in a competing offer, it may be possible for the buyers to de-escalate their purchase price. For example, here's the example they give. Offer number 1, purchase price $200,000, seller assist $5,000. So the net purchase price in this scenario is $195,000. Okay. Offer number 2, purchase price is $198,000. Seller assistant is only $1,000. So the net purchase price is $197,000. Okay, so we're comparing $195,000 to $197,000. If offer 2 had an escalation clause, it would not be used because the net purchase price in offer number 2 is already higher than offer number 1, even though offer number 1 has a higher purchase price. Right? We're comparing net purchase price. So this is a very good example of why we do that. Note, the listing agent should provide a full copy of the competing offer to the buyer in order to justify the escalation, not just the first few pages. So if you ever get another agent that doesn't want to send you the whole contract, send them this guideline and highlight that. Okay, right there it says it in the guideline. The listing agent should provide a full copy of the competing offer to the buyer in order to justify the escalation, not just the first few pages. We've ran into situations where agents just send the escalation clause, okay, which is fine. But then they don't send over the other pages, and probably the most crucial one is page number 2, because that has the seller assistance on there. And then when it was sent, we find out that there was seller assist. So, you know, that's not the net. Questions may arise about the overall value of another offer. So let's talk about terms here. For the most part, buyers don't get to challenge the seller's decision based on what the buyer thinks was the better offer. The only terms being compared are the NPP, net purchase price. Nothing says that the other offer has to have other terms that are equal to or better than the offer submitted by the buyer. They just have to be real offers, bona fide, from real potential purchasers. In short, if the buyer wants the benefit of the automatic price increase, they don't get to select when it applies and when it doesn't. Okay, that's up to the seller's sole discretion. So here's an example that they give. It's actually a very good one too. Offer 1 has a net purchase price of $200,000. Closing in 30 days, no inspections, escalation clause offering to beat competing offers by $1,000 up to $210,000 max. Offer number 2, net purchase price $207,000. Closing is 4 months out, 120 days. all the inspections. They chose all inspections. No escalation clause. While some may consider offer one to be the better offer, even without the escalation clause, the existence of a bona fide offer in number two with a higher net purchase price triggers the escalation clause in offer number one. It is at the seller's sole discretion to accept or reject offers. This addendum is only intended to be used as a tool to increase the purchase price and not to change terms unrelated to the purchase price. Okay, so if you're looking at the two offers, yeah, the one with no inspections in 30 days, that's a great offer as is. But they said they were willing to pay $1,000 higher, up to 210. So in this case, we'd be at 208. Okay. If the list agent said to their seller, offer one is better, we don't need the escalation, we just put $8,000, left $8,000 off the table. Okay. And let's say you do that and you send the bona fide offer to offer number one, you send them offer number two so they can see it, why we escalated the price. And they say, well, wait a minute. This one says it's 120 days and they want all the inspections. Ours was better without those terms. Mr. Buyer, that's not up to you to determine. That's the seller's sole discretion. Okay. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Note, seller may find it helpful to use the multiple offer summary sheet to compare terms of several offers. Okay. And if you don't know what that form is, let's see here. It's this sheet. It's the MOS, multiple offer sheet summary. And here we have a comparison between two offers. Okay. So can anybody tell me what the final price on this one should be? What's the highest price? Can everybody see it?
482. So the offer should be 475.5.
Yep.
You take it,
Offer number
you take
two.
it to the maximum on the offer number two, you go to their maximum escalation, you go back to offer number one, you add the $500, and you could sell it to offer number one for 475,500.
Yep.
Anybody question that?
Tim, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Not to confuse everybody, but let's say offer number two, they're willing to pay 3K over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at 469 on the first offer, and let's say the second offer was 472, isn't offer number one still even better, even before you escalate it anymore? Right?
Yeah, it'd be $500 better.
Right, but it doesn't matter because we're comparing purchase price, not terms on the escalation clause. So you can absolutely just go to the max of offer two, and then offer one just takes it over by 500.
Now, let's say that offer number two, the max was 485. Let's say that it said 485 there. What would the sale price be if you took offer number two and it would go up to 485? What would it be? That means that you take offer number one's 482, you add the 3,000, now it becomes 485, which is the maximum offer number two would be.
So you're basically saying they would be the exact same offer?
I'm saying that in offer number 2, where it says $3,000 over, up to 485, if it said 485 instead of 475. And then you look at those two offers, offer number 1 is willing to go to 482. So now that's the highest escalation that you have against two offers. And this one's willing to pay, offer number 2 is willing to pay $3,000 over that price of 482, which would take it up to 485, which would be the maximum offer number 2 would pay.
Then offer 2 would win.
Right, correct,
In
Yep.
price, yes.
in price.
Yep. Yep.
That's why I want to make sure everybody understands how this works. And if you don't, please don't be embarrassed. Just ask a question so that we can continue to explain it. And that's why I said in the beginning of this call, if you get multiple offers, please call us and let us look at your summary sheet, because this is important. We have had agents who have maybe cost their seller some money by not understanding the escalation addendum, the way it works. So we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page and understands this thing.
Now, what I have done in the past too, and you're allowed to do this, is counter an offer during an escalation or with escalations and such. And you can call them up and say, this is not an escalation. This has nothing to do with the escalation. This is just a straight up counter. Okay. Has nothing to do with an escalation clause, and then offer them a price. And when you do that, when you do a straight up counter and cross out the escalation clause on page 13 of the agreement of sale, where they checkboxed it to include it, and cross that out, you have to show them the other offer.
Are you still in a multiple offer
Yes.
situation? Call,
Yes.
you are.
I don't think you'd have to show them if you're crossing out the escalation.
Correct, Regina. It's not part of the contract. Yep, you can do a straight up counter too. We've done that in the past. We sat down with sellers, and what appears to be the highest offer, we go back to number 2, maybe they had cash, say, hey, this is a straight up counter, no escalation, or you want to go up to X amount. And if they say yes, cross it out, send it over. Don't have to show them the other offer. Okay. Let's go back to the form. Paragraph 6, they call this the seller's final step. Seller will fill in the new purchase price as calculated based on the terms of paragraph 2 between buyers and sellers' signatures below. Buyer understands and acknowledges that no further signature or initials are required on this form to have an executed addendum. So again, here it is. Once you submit it, you're at the mercy of the seller to pick a price, as long as they can prove it, to execute this agreement of sale. Okay. Buyer agrees to sign or initial and date the agreement of sale to reflect any increase in the purchase price and or any other change in terms made in accordance with this addendum. Buyer's refusal to sign or initial any changes made in accordance with this addendum will result in buyer being in default under the terms of the agreement of sale. Let's read that again. At the request of seller, comma, buyer's lender, comma, or any of the real estate licensee involved in the transaction, the list agent, the buyer agent, okay? Buyer agrees to sign or initial and date the agreement of sale to reflect any increase in the purchase price and or any other changes in terms made in accordance with this addendum. So a big thing that has been happening is the appraiser gets a copy of the contract, okay? And they look at it, oh, okay, $200,000. That should be easy to appraise. What they don't get is the escalation clause that states that they increased it to 225. Right? So in their minds, they're thinking, okay, it only has to appraise for 200 when it really has to appraise for 225 to make the deal go. Okay. So what the smart thing to do would be, after you get the escalation clause and the agreement of sale all agreed, to change the price on the agreement of sale to reflect what's on the addendum. And what that little paragraph there, that little sentence there states is the buyer will absolutely agree to do that. Okay, they can't say, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to make any changes or anything. No, at the seller, buyer's lender, or any of the agents involved at their request, you will initial off on those changes or be in default. Okay.
Is that a better practice than just sending them a copy of the escalation clause, Quan? Because I've had lenders just ask for the escalation clause.
Yeah, because it's all in one.
Even
Okay.
if you, Jim, even if you gave the escalation clause to the lender, what's important is to make sure that it gets to the appraiser. Because now, what if the lender doesn't give that to the appraiser and they skip that one page and they only
That
give
makes-
the agreement of sale? So if you're going to do it that way, we need to make sure that when the appraisal's set up through the listing agent, that listing agent makes sure that they give that appraiser that addendum if the agreement of sale isn't changed.
Yeah, it's amazing how many times I've seen it too, where the appraiser gets a copy of the contract, and on the very last page, it's check marked and it says attached as a escalation clause, and they never ask for it.
Right.
Aaron Ullum and I have gotten in trouble with that, where it was our buyer. We sent everything to the lender,
Right.
and the lender never included the escalation, and the appraiser went out, appraised it. When the appraisal came back, I think it was like $20-some thousand lower than what we were under contract for. The appraiser would not change or even reconsider the addendum for the escalation.
Yep.
So we had to fight the lender
Yeah.
to order a second appraisal.
You know, one of the, whoever's speaking to the appraiser too, I found it's important to let them know how many multiple offers there were on the property. You know, how about it, Kong?
Yeah.
And explain why that's important. They need to know that, you know, we had 10 offers and 9 of them were over the asking price, you know.
Right. Yeah, they're
I
all,
also, if I'm the listing agent and the appraiser calls me to schedule, I have had a number of appraisers ask me why I priced the house the way I priced it. Because I may have priced it slightly lower in order to get competitive offers, and then all of a sudden we're up really high. I think these appraisers need to understand we have our own strategies of getting the highest and best offers for the value of these homes. And so sometimes I will explain to the appraiser, you are going to see a lower dollar amount on the list on the MLS, but I know that going into it. Do not assume, because they do that. They look at that MLS list price And they assume that we're overvaluing if we take a higher dollar amount. It's frustrating.
Thanks for bringing that up. We actually brought that up in last week's call, was about pricing property. And we were talking about the two different markets. And for instance, here in our area, there were people that were getting 17, 18, 20, 25 offers still on a property. So what we were talking is our strategy, just like you said, Stacy, was to, well, our coach used to say, keep it low and watch it go. Okay. If you price it right and price it not too high and keep it low, all of a sudden you're going to create so much action on it that it's like an auction, and people's emotions will bid it up because they want it. And they, now there'll be people that'll drop out and say, I'm not going to compete. And, they're never going to buy a house because right now there's multiple offers. But I agree with your strategy of pricing it at a point that's going to generate multiple offers.
Here's another important sentence here, the last sentence of this paragraph 6, okay? Changing the purchase price or other terms in the already executed agreement of sale to reflect any changes made by this addendum does not change the execution date of the agreement of sale. So why is that important? Because if there are inspections, okay, let's say 10-day inspections, okay? The contract is executed today on the 18th. There was an escalation and we decided on the 20th, hey, let's make the change to the agreement of sale so that it's all in one document so the appraiser doesn't get confused. So we make the changes on April 20th, okay? But it was executed today on the 18th. That doesn't mean now that the buyer, their 10 days starts from the 20th, okay? The execution date was already set at the 18th today. So they have 10 days from today, okay? Not when we revised the agreement of sale, just so for changes to send to the lender, okay? That's right there written for you already too.
Colin, would that be true if you had initials and a date beside the change that you just made? Would that new date not be the new date of execution?
Nope. Changing the purchase price or other terms in this already executed agreement of sale to reflect any changes made by this addendum does not change the execution date of the agreement of sale. So yeah, it does not, Bob. It's very important to remember that, and especially when you're working with any agent, when you make a change to this, just remind them, hey, read line 1, what is it, 36. We're going to make this change, but that doesn't mean your buyer gets an extra 2 days to do inspections. Okay. All other terms and conditions of the agreement of sale remain unchanged and in full force and effect. Buyer signs it, sends it to the seller and list agent. And then A, under buyer, A, the purchase price of the agreement of sale is increased from blank to blank. So that's where you put in your new price, okay, as seller. Pursuant to the terms set forth in paragraph 2 above, a copy of the competing offer is attached. So there, again, it states the competing offer is attached. So 2 times in this document, it's mentioned that it's attached when you execute this agreement of sale at the time. B, the mortgage contingency paragraph of the agreement of sale is modified to reflect the changes made in paragraph 3 above. C, seller has accepted buyer's offer and has executed the agreement. C means that the seller has accepted the buyer's offer, the agreement. So in 2 days, they can't say, well, you know what? We sold it to you for 210, but you're willing to escalate it to 225. Let's go up to 220. Can't do that. Okay. That's an example of why that's there. Okay. And the seller signs and dates it, and we have an executed addendum. Any questions?
Tom, I think you did a very, oh, go ahead, Tom.
All right, earlier in the session, you had stated on my agreement to sell for my buyer, we waived the mortgage contingency, okay? Now we came into the escalation clause here and now we're escalating up. Let's say we're willing to escalate whatever amount is. And my seller says, well, or my buyer says, I want the escalation, since we're escalating to that price, I'm gonna now finance it. You had stated that you can still elect it, but we waived it on the initial agreement to sell. Where are we going to put that in, or where are you seeing people putting that stipulation back into the contract, saying now, since we are escalating up, sell price was 200, now we're escalated 250, at 200, we're not going to use the financing contingency. Now we want to use it at 250. This form does not show anywhere that you can elect to go back into and elect it and change, make it a contingent on a mortgage. Where are you seeing people making that change?
When you waive the mortgage contingency, you can still get a mortgage, correct?
Yes, you can.
And I think what you're saying, Tom, is if you waive it on the original agreement of sale and now
Yeah.
you want it, right?
Yeah. Since I'm escalating, I want it.
Right.
How do where have you seen people, because there's no check mark here saying, oh, now we are going to
Here's how you do it, Tom. You elect the second box, okay? Or first off, there has to be a change in terms applied to it as well.
Yeah, you got to do something in addition
gotta
to
have a
this
change.
form. This form, even your second thing does not cover that. You need to do a change of terms with it if you're going to do that.
So you have to attach the change in terms. And the hard part about this whole thing is you don't know what price you end up at, right? You can
Yeah.
attach an appraisal contingency, but what do you put down? What price? Especially if you want to cover an appraisal gap, which we'll cover on Thursday, by the way. But you're right, you have to have a change in terms so that you can kind of fill in that box that you left blank on the agreement of sale.
Yeah, and the problem is getting these incompetent agents on the other end trying to understand these. It's
Yeah.
tough.
It's so hard because you know it, Tom. It's like the more attachments you have, it's like these other agents are like, oh, when it's not that hard. It's just explaining it and docu-signing it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. You're right. You need a change in terms. If you waive it initially and now you elect to have it. Okay.
Well, Kong, I wanted to say thank you to you. This was a good hour-long conversation on escalation. Clearly, everybody needs to continue to educate themselves on this form. Along with this form, like you said, on Thursday at 2:00, we're going to be going over the appraisal contingency form that kind of goes along with this escalation form if you're electing an appraisal contingency. So I would encourage, if at all possible, for you guys to get on the call on Thursday at 2:00. Hopefully Brooks and Kong will record it for those that aren't able to make that time. And then that way they can get an update on how the appraisal contingency form relates to the escalation form or doesn't if there's not one.
Here's what we're going to do too. I think I'm going to try to go over the form as quickly as possible. But the best way to learn that form is bring your scenarios and let's talk it out. Appraisal gaps. What if the buyer's willing to cover this or the seller's not willing to do that? That type of thing. Bring your scenarios and let's talk it out and see what we would do on the form to make it the right way.
Okay, Brooks or Dad, anything else you'd like to say?
No, this is a great session, very complicated, and you really got to stay focused on this stuff because it can bite you if you're not really paying attention.
Brooksy, anything else?
Yeah, no, just if anyone has any questions or hesitations or, wants a second opinion when they're looking at multiple offers, reach out. We're here for you. We'll take a look at all of them, work through the details with you and make sure everything's straight and understood.